the more you resist something, the more it's going to actually grow, and it's going to become more persistent and trying to get your attention. And so when you
Welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs, and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life. Whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself, we're here to tell you that settling's not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can email us at cheerstonotsettling@gmail.com. Finally, to conclude the plug, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Ko-fi, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment. So I thought I'd just introduce a bit of a change in the structure of the show. So we've done a few episodes now, and Amanda and I thought we'd just kind of reflect on where we're at and where we want to go. So previously, our model was we'd basically have a guest come on the show. We'd have a chat about all kinds of topics, wellness, consciousness, heaps of topics. Go back through and
quantum physics,
lots
religion,
and lots of stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Heaps of stuff. And then the week after that, Amanda and I would sit down and we'd just chat amongst ourselves about those things, so kind of talk about all the things that we hadn't covered in the show with the guest. And that worked for a while. We had some really good conversation, but we felt like we were kind of moving away from where we originally wanted to go. And we wanted to spend a bit more time just chatting about one topic, because we didn't think we really was devoting enough time, I suppose, to one topic. So we're going to kind of commit almost to a season is what we're going to call it. We're still debating whether that's the right terminology. But where we're going to start today is about Carl Jung's The Shadow, which Amanda's going to talk about a little bit more. And we're going to try and stick on that topic. So like psychology, Carl Jung, Freud, that kind of stuff. We're going to try and stick to that for a month and kind of just keep it on that kind of topic for a while.
Yep.
Did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I think that's great. So cool. You want me to introduce Carl Jung now? I can't pronounce it.
Please do.
I'm going to say this right now. That I believe the proper pronunciation, I can't even say pronunciation. I believe the proper pronunciation is Jung. But I am not going to say that correctly. So just so everybody is aware, I'm probably going to say it 20 different ways. But so this is what I got off of Wikipedia. So I'm just going to read it here. So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. And analytical psychology basically just means that you are dealing with and analyzing a person's current situation rather than trying to heal or reveal past traumas. So that's what that means. Jung's work was influential in the fields of psychiatry, anthropology, archaeology, literature, philosophy, and religious studies. So he was a pretty well-studied guy. Yeah, he's kind of busy. He created some of the best-known psychological concepts, including archetypal phenomena, which we're going to talk about next week, by the way. Archetypal phenomena, the collective unconscious, and extroversion and introversion. Among the central concepts of analytical psychology is individuation, which is the lifelong psychological process of differentiation of the self out of each individual's conscious and unconscious elements, which Jung considered to be the main task of human development. And Jung felt that to become individuated, so to become yourself, he felt that you had to embrace your shadow, understand your shadow, and embrace your shadow. So the shadow is where we're going to start, and we're going to be talking about that today. And what the shadow is, and Adam's going to give us some analogies to kind of put the shadow in perspective. But basically what the shadow is it's the part of yourself that you hide from the world, either because you're ashamed of it, maybe you feel like it's socially unacceptable or bad in some way. So it's kind of the opposite. So your persona is the you that you show to the world and who you present to the world. And the shadow is basically the opposite of your persona. So you want to take it away, Adam?
Yeah.
All right.
So if anyone's scratching their head out there, a couple of pop culture references, I suppose. One would be from back in the 1800s. It's the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So that book from that Scottish writer, Robbie Louis Stevenson. I haven't actually read it, but talking about the shadows made me...
I haven't read it either, but,
but
a lot of people are familiar with that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's ingrained in pop culture, but it did make me think I would be curious to read it. Yeah. And I think it came off the back of Stevenson had a dream about this particular thing, the duality of personalities.
Oh, and duality. That's a perfect way to say it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So he kind of thought, all right, let's write a book about it. And obviously he did pretty well. Another example for any nerds out there is Marvel. So the latest movie on the Avengers Endgame, right? Actually, that's not the latest movie. Sorry for any aficionados out there. But anyways.
I wouldn't know the difference. So I would go along with whatever you say.
But we all know about the Hulk and Bruce Banner. So obviously, two dualities. One's more aggressive, one's more scientific, pretty much in line with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And in this most recent movie, they actually have these two entities come together. So you have the Hulk and Bruce Banner come together, and they specifically talk about how when they work together and they don't work against each other, things just, it makes for a much stronger, more informed entity. And that was an interesting thing that I only just thought about, but it feels like a good example of the shadow and, the persona, which would be Bruce Banner, and the shadow, which is the Hulk. Yeah.
No, perfect.
So those are my analogies. Hopefully that helps anyone who's sitting there scratching their head. But I'll chuck it back to Amanda because there's three topics in particularly we want to cover.
Yep. So, as usual, we're just going to talk and see where the conversation goes. But we do want to make sure that the listeners and viewers get some value and know what you're sticking around for. So you can stick around and listen to this episode and you will learn about. We're going to talk about don't settle for your preconceived notions of the world and yourself. Don't settle for resisting your shadow. And don't settle for confusing aggression with destruction as you accept your shadow. So those are the three things we're going to try to hit. And Adam had some ideas about the preconceived notions. And I think that ties in well because I think our preconceived notions about the world, about ourselves, are what lead us to hide our shadow, because if our shadow is what we don't want other people to see because it's unacceptable in some way, well, that would mean there has to be a preconceived notion there telling us that it's unacceptable.
Yes. So I think the shadow is a really good topic that ties into the whole theme of the show, because the whole purpose of the show is not settling. And one of the things that we talk about is not settling, for how you view yourself. You need to look inward. So to the first topic, it's the power of introspection, always looking inward and challenging how you perceive the world. And I think this was a really powerful thing for me. It's really useful when you've got when you've got people in your life that will challenge you. And one of the big things that
I'm smiling because I always challenge Adam. So
but it's a great thing, right? Like ideally you want to get to the point where you're challenging yourself.
Right.
And so you don't have to have others challenge you, but it's looking at the claim. So if you view something in a certain way, whether it's, a political ideology, whether it's your views on religion, your views on a number of things, you should just take that minute to just look inward and think, okay, well, where's this coming from? Because it could be derived from this shadow. Because the thing with the shadow, from anything I've kind of read or listened to, it's very elusive. And the only way to really find the shadow is to continue to look inward. Like it's a big moral responsibility for all of us to continue to look inward and challenge those things. So it's very interesting. And I almost likened it in a way, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Amanda. Because you've been reading A New Earth, do you think there's some ties between the shadow and Tolle's view on the pain body?
Absolutely. Yeah. So New Earth is a book by Eckhart Tolle, which we've talked about a lot on the show. Adam's kind of turned me into Eckhart Tolle nerd or fangirl. I don't know. I'm not a fangirl yet, but yes, I definitely, because I I'm in the middle of that book still. And I'm actually writing an article about the pain body right now. And I was doing research for this show, so I have been definitely thinking of those things together. And because the pain body is, in a nutshell, unprocessed emotions that you're trying to ignore. I mean, there's more to it than that, but in a nutshell, it's a part of you. And when you ignore them, they become a part of you and they affect how you see the world, how you react to the world, and all these things. And so, yes, it definitely, there's some tie-in there with the shadow. But I'm thinking now of what exactly that tie-in is.
Yeah, well,
maybe we could flush that out a minute.
Yeah, well, the way I kind of look at the pain body, because they probably are slightly different. Like, I think the pain body's easier to identify than the shadow is.
That's a good point.
The pain body, the way that I really liked Tolly's discussion on the pain body was this idea of, for example, when you get drunk, and, you know, sometimes you get drunk and say you've had a bad couple of weeks or something like that, and maybe you do things that you wouldn't normally do. I don't know, maybe you just make an idiot of yourself. Right. It sounds pretty, pretty relatable to me.
I'm thinking, you've never done that, have you?
Yeah, I've never done
I haven't.
That, you know?
I mean, no, I definitely have.
Yeah, I definitely have, And Tolly almost says, like, when you become unconscious, what can happen is the pain body can actually take the light in a way. So rather than you being conscious and doing the right things, that kind of all those negative emotions, negative thoughts and stuff that you haven't dealt with and addressed, they're all built up in the pain body. And the pain body wants to surface so that it can live through you. Right. So it wants to experience more pain because it builds itself up. So that's why when you're drinking and, your defenses come down a little bit and you kind of go below consciousness is the way Tolly talks about it, then the pain body comes out. Right. And that's traditionally why people will say, wake up the next day and think, oh gosh, what the hell? That wasn't me. I'm really sorry. It's not me. But you're talking through this conscious self as opposed to that unconscious self. So there's probably parallels between that and the shadow. But I think
like you say, the shadow. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I thought you were done for some reason, but you can go ahead if you want to.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the shadow's probably buried even deeper. Like, I think maybe the pain body's like a level up from the shadow. And really, if you want to deal with the pain body, you probably need to deal with the shadow first.
You think so? Or do you think you have to deal with I was just going to say maybe you have to deal with the pain body first.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
we should put a poll up online.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah, we should.
Yes.
So, all right. So the reason I'm thinking this, now I got to get back to my thought. All right. So I'm thinking because the shadow is more elusive, like you said, it almost doesn't want to be seen. Whereas your pain body wants to be seen. It seems to me like your pain body is you'd have to deal with your pain body first because otherwise it's going to keep overpowering you. So like if you think of your consciousness as 3 different levels, and because that's how it's talked about, that you have the unconscious mind, the subconscious, and the conscious. It almost feels to me then like the pain body, they're both usually in your unconscious, but the pain body will come up in your subconscious and then into your conscious, where the shadow kind of hangs out down here in your unconscious all the time. And so it seems like you got to shut up your pain body to get down here, because otherwise your pain body is moving up and it's going to keep distracting you and it's going to keep coming into your consciousnness until you deal with it. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
It's a tricky one. I like the fact, though, that we don't have an answer straight away, because I think if we did have an answer, that would be concerning because it's such a big topic.
Right. Exactly.
So, because, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think the pain body can only be, like, it'll never go away. I don't think you can ever get rid of the pain body.
Yeah, and I don't know that you want to. Well, and maybe that's the thing, though. Actually, now that I'm saying that, because your pain body too works against you. I don't know that there is a positive side to the pain body, where there is a positive side to the shadow. So the shadow is more trying to teach you something, I believe.
Well, so for example, like I would say we all have a persona that we show the world every day.
Yeah.
And we all have a shadow, because that's just how we've been since, I guess, humanity's existed.
Right.
Is that, and it's probably stemming from that really primordial kind of sense of self and how we operate in the world.
And it's a whole yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. Like everything in nature has a good side and a bad side, a dark side and a light side, however you want to see it. There's always that balance. And that's, you can see that, and that'll get into some of the archetypes maybe that we'll talk about next week. But but if you really stop to look at everything, for some reason this stupid example is coming in my head of like the rose with a thorn.
Is
like
that
that's the stupidest example that I could think of. But for some reason it's stuck in my head. But you know, it's like you have the beauty and the pain that exist together. You have, even to survive, you need to eat. And in order to eat, you have to kill something. Whether it be an animal or a plant, you have to kill something. So in order for one thing to survive, another thing has to die. It's like, it's such a basic part of existence. And so I think that's where the shadow, it's just a basic part of existence.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, I think this is a big conflict in humanity today, right? So I will commonly have walks around the place, and I'll just look at nature. So especially when you're out in like raw nature, I'm not talking about like the park or the reserve that the council's, you know, built up and made it a really controlled nature space. Like I'm talking about raw nature. And like raw nature's just that, it's chaos. It's like, you know, it just does its thing. And whereas with human beings, I think we really like control. We really like, that's why we're all so worried about putting a persona on, you know, am I going to say the right thing in this group context? But deep down, there is that shadow self in there that you've almost pushed down, because you're like, I can't let any of these shadow things come out, because if I do that at this work function or something, you know, I'll probably get in trouble, or, you know, it's taboo. But I think it causes a constant conflict in people, because, you know, every single day you're waking up and you're fighting with yourself.
Right.
And I think that was the big thing for me, which is why it's important to, you know, when Amanda first spoke to me about it, she said about bringing that shadow self, you know, into your normal self.
Right.
And then that'll help you negotiate it. So it'll be looking at those things. Yeah. And thinking, how can I actually blend these together? Another one I read about, I suppose, kind of drawing back to the introspection piece, was this idea of people who judge others when those are some of the things that they do wrong themselves, I guess.
Right.
And I don't know if you've had that, you know, it could be, you know, like you judge someone like, oh, I can't believe that they went and bought that new car. They don't need that new car. But then deep down, maybe you're jealous and you wanted that car, or there's some similar crossovers. So what did you think about that? Do you think that would be an example of the shadow?
Oh, it is 100%. Yeah. And I can say that with confidence only because I've done research on it, not because not because I'm like some expert or anything. But no, it definitely is. And so I guess that's the envy is probably your shadow, and you want to try to deny that you would ever be envious. But if you just bring it to light and see, that's the thing, and we've kind of been talking about this a little bit in other episodes too, but the more you resist something, the more it's going to actually grow, and it's going to become more persistent and trying to get your attention. And so when you're trying, so taking this example, when you're trying to ignore that envy, it's going to affect your behavior in ways that you don't even realize.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would just say, oh, I'm really envious of that person's car, and just say it out loud and own it, it would just be gone, because it's just a thought. And if you can acknowledge your thought and just let it pass on by, that's what it's going to do. If you don't acknowledge it, it's going to fester and it's going to turn into some type of unwanted behavior or feelings or whatever.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I've heard a few people talk about that with negative emotions, how we really don't like to live them. But then it's been shown that if you kind of just allow a negative emotion to come in, do its thing, and then leave, it's going to be a lot quicker than if you try and resist it.
Exactly.
And I can totally agree with that. Like, I get annoyed when I'm annoyed.
Yeah.
So, like,
right.
you know, because I'll be like, why am I unhappy today? No, I want to be happy. Like, I'm going to fight this feeling of unhappiness. And by fighting it and resisting it, it makes me more unhappy. And then what could have been like a, you know, half an hour of frustration at something turns into maybe a whole day.
Right.
So I guess it is just going, all right, I'm unhappy. That's weird.
Right.
Let me just try and figure out why and just let it come and go. And maybe just warn people around me, hey, I'm grumpy today. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah.
I've just got to go through the motions of this thing and then I'll come out the other side. But yeah, I think all of us do. We're like, no, I don't want to face a negative emotion. I want to get back to the good stuff.
Right. Or is it too that you don't want to admit that you have faults?
Yeah, probably.
You know, because that's part of it. Because if you're acknowledging a negative emotion or whatever, a negative concept of whatever kind, you're admitting that you have a fault. And, you know, we all like to pretend that we're perfect or something.
Yeah.
And not even that we're perfect, but I think it probably goes back to even like so basic survival. Like, you're worried about your faults being called out because you're worried that you're going to be removed from the tribe that you're in.
Yeah.
And you need your tribe to survive. You know, it goes back to very, very basic instinct, survival instincts. A lot of it does, I think.
And I think as well, like I heard someone the other day, I can't remember who it was, but a distinguished academic of some kind, was talking about how our brains, I think it was Rick Hansen, actually, Dr. Rick Hansen, definitely check him out. He's amazing the way he talks about, he blends neuroscience and mindfulness together in a really amazing way.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely worth listening to. And he talks about our brain is not meant for this kind of time that we're in. Like, it's a very old kind of machine. And that's why we have so many tensions. And I completely agree. Like, it is built for a time that was probably a lot simpler. Yeah. Which is why, like, fight and flight responses, for example, now are so frustrating. Like, you know, people are always talking about there's no tiger hiding in the bushes that you need to run away from. Now the tiger in the bushes is maybe a crowd of people in the audience that you need to present to.
Sure.
And you know, it's really annoying. You know, you don't want your heart racing in that situation because it makes it really hard for you to maybe do what you need to do. So, yeah, it's trying to learn with a brain that's very old and how to make it work for you in this, you know, this crazy new modern time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that's a pretty good overview of maybe the preconceived notions that we have about the shadow.
We'll take that off the list.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking so, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because it's making me think then. So Jung, and I probably just said that wrong. Whatever.
No, you said it right.
I just hate saying it. I just feel silly when I say it for some reason. But I feel like I don't feel like it. I know that he thought that to become your best self and realize your full development as a person, you had to integrate your shadow into your personality and fully embrace it, not hide it. And in doing that, your potential would actually show through. So maybe that's the next thing to talk about is in embracing the shadow. Well, why is it a good thing? Why would it help your potential show through? And to me, I think it helps because and this is a very basic observation, but because you're not trying to fight it anymore, you're just letting it come out when it comes out, and you understand it. And once you understand it, though, you can control it. So once you have accepted it, you've gained an understanding of it, you can control it, you're not fighting it all the time. And so that allows which one was bad? Jekyll or Hyde? Jekyll is good.
Hyde's the bad one.
Hyde's. So I just completely derailed my example here because I couldn't remember. So Hyde's the bad one.
Okay. Hey, in your defense, like Jekyll sounds worse than Hyde, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like,
I know. That's why. Anywho, I was going to try to make this sound really fancy. That's not happening. So what I'm going to say is your good side, your good side is going to be able to shine because you're not spending all of your energy trying to fight your bad side anymore. And so that's just natural that you're giving more space and more room for yourself to grow.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you would sum it up, or?
Yeah, I think so. Because it is pretty exhausting. Like, if you were to put it like, this is probably why people are so exhausted every day.
Yeah, really.
You're having to fight against your shadow every day, fight against your pain body.
Yeah.
Put on this face every day because those are the only things acceptable in society. Like, and that's before you even get out of bed, you know?
Well, true.
Like, it's no wonder that people are like, God, I'm exhausted at the end of the day because, you know, and then you think how many thoughts we have in a day, which, you know, as Dispenza, and we've said this on previous shows, you know, how many thoughts are duplicated from the day before. Like, it's no wonder we are so exhausted. So I guess this is probably about getting us to all, you know, think about how we can stop exhausting ourselves by fighting these things.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I do have some other examples if you would like me to refer to them.
Yes, please.
So because of course I wrote an article about the shadow a long time ago. So I pulled it out again today to look at it. But and these are according to, I was thinking this was according to Jordan Peterson, but I guess this is just a combination of a bunch of different sources I used. But maybe we can talk about these a little bit too. So some benefits of embracing your shadow or not fighting your shadow any longer are that you will know true morality, and I can explain that in a second. So you will know true morality, you will know how to control your aggression, which we're going to talk about aggression a little bit later. You'll stop projecting your shadow onto others, which we talked about projection a little bit earlier, and you will realize your full potential. So those were, when I was doing my research on the shadow, that's what I found, is those were 4 reasons that you would want to embrace it. And stop. Besides just not wanting to tire yourself out anymore, which is a good reason. But once you do that successfully, once you understand it, accept it, learn how to control it, then all these other good things are going to start opening up in your life. But I think this is interesting. So the true morality thing, do you want to talk about that a minute? Because that's pretty interesting.
I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, and I think this is from Jordan Peterson. I got this idea, but so being a moral person doesn't mean that you're good 100% of the time. And actually, to be a truly moral person, you have to have temptations and be able to control yourself enough to avoid those temptations. That's what makes you a moral person. So I think, so again, it goes back to being aware of your shadow and knowing how to control it. And and then I also found or wrote about that most people act in moral ways because they're afraid of getting in trouble. So they're not really acting in a moral, they're not really moral. They just don't want to get in trouble. And so that's different than having true morality, because if you had true morality, you wouldn't consider whether or not you were going to get in trouble. So your shadow, I think the point of that is that your shadow can help you discover your true morality. because now you have an understanding of the good and the bad inside of you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did I just throw you for a complete loop?
No, I'm just thinking now.
Yeah.
That seems to me like morality. So in the face of knowing your desires that you're like, realistically, these are probably not acceptable, but morality is by saying every day I face into that and I say I can control myself.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
and I think that's a good point though too, is that so accepting and embracing your shadow doesn't mean that you just do whatever. So you have all these, I guess those come immoral thoughts, since we're using that terminology right now. However you define immoral. So you have these immoral impulses, these immoral thoughts, feelings. So it doesn't mean you act on them. You know, that's a pretty important point to make, maybe, is that it doesn't mean you act on them, but it means that you acknowledge them and you acknowledge that that's a part of you and that you can do things, that you're capable of things. That's what it also gets into, I guess, is we all like to think that we're not capable of certain things. And this is kind of, I don't know, a cliche example, but it's just where my mind always goes, is when you think of the Nazi soldiers. I can't pronounce anything today. Okay. The Nazi soldiers.
Yes.
And people like to say, oh, I can never do that. I can never kill those people, blah, blah, blah. Well, these were just normal men that got pulled into this and were brainwashed or forced to do it. Either they were just completely brainwashed or they were forced to do a horrific act so many times that they became desensitized to it. And that could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And so, because they were just normal people, just like you and me, but they, they had families, they had, most of them, I mean, there were some that probably chose that life, but a lot of them didn't choose to do those things. And so
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So where does this, like, who sets the standard that then dictates what is moral and immoral?
Right. Like, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because I just kept thinking there where that comes from. So like it made me start to think of Alain de Botton. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong.
Oh yeah, I remember who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but he talks a lot about romance and love and how society talks about that, and popular movies on romance and stuff.
Right.
And how that causes a lot of conflict, I suppose, in society with relationships. So, for example, he talks about the high divorce rate worldwide. And he's like, why do you think that happens? Is it because we've got this unrealistic expectation? So there, for example, like, and it might tie back in with the whole post-Christian society we're in, where adultery is bad, etc. But, like traditionally, it would be immoral to say if you're in a monogamous relationship and you step out and you do something romantic or lustful or whatever you want to call it with someone else, we consider that immoral.
Right.
But then I guess my question is like, where do these standards come from? Because we know at the core of it, society has really got a lot of things wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong, but society's got a lot of things.
Well, it might be. How do we know? I mean, maybe it is wrong.
Well, Alain de Botton says it's not. He kind of
says it's not wrong.
He said, you've got to understand. Well, the way he talks about it is to say, like, you need to communicate in your relationship and understand the flaws, I guess, or the lack of perfection in your other, in your partner.
Sure.
So he said, to basically
maybe accept your partner's shadow.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And to say, like, just, despite the fact that, we consider these things maybe not being perfect, I still love you unconditionally based on who you are. Right. So that's what he says, is communicating those things. And it could be even turning around, like his example was saying to your romantic partner, I actually feel like I want to be intimate with someone else or whatever it may be, which a lot of people wouldn't want to do.
Facing it. See, there we go. Yeah. That's perfect, because if you just faced it, it would probably, I think that is a perfect example, because I think Okay, so you keep it to yourself, and that just amplifies the thoughts, and that gives it even a more romantic feel or whatever. It romanticizes that in your mind even more.
Yeah.
And it makes you even want it even more because you can't have it. And so then, yeah, it just perpetuates itself. Whereas if you just opened your mouth and said, hey, partner, I'm thinking about hooking up with this guy down the street. What do you think about that? Like, but not that way. Not that you were going to do it, because again, if you were controlling your shadow, if you had integrated your shadow, you'd be in control of it. So you weren't going to act on it. Yeah. But you recognize that you're having these thoughts. And if you had that open and honest conversation, those thoughts would probably go away.
A question on that though, because when Elaine was talking about this particular subject, all I could think was, you know, how feasible is it though for these conversations to be had? Because you think, I don't know about you or anyone in our audience, you know, you're going to have thoughts like that. And I think it's good in a relationship when you turn around and you could say like, oh, I think that person's attractive, you know, the person walking down the street, and you go, oh yeah, okay. But how feasible would it be in a relationship to turn around and say, hey, see that person over there, you know, I want to go and be intimate with them. Right. Like, you know, how feasible is it that people would want to actually go that route? Because it probably would be met, you know, for a lot of people with like, really? Like, why do you want to do that? And people would look at, you know, is it maybe their shadow?
Yeah. Or their pain body, or both.
Oh, is it, something to do with me? And is that the two shadows against each other that causes that maybe?
Yeah, I think so, because, and the other person, and I'm almost leaning more toward the pain body, because the other person has in their mind somehow that if one other person's attractiveness diminishes my attractiveness somehow.
Yes, yep.
And somehow they were taught that. And somehow that's a part of their pain body, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving, but then the jealousy. So it's interesting. So there's probably, here we go, we're geeking out.
Yeah, there's so many things at play. I love
it. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe it starts at the pain body, and then though, as I'm playing with my wedding ring, is that a Freudian slip there?
Oh, that's so good. Perfect timing.
A little Freudian slip in the show. So it starts with the pain body, and then the jealousy, though, that accompanies it is your shadow, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Because, I mean, that's why everyone's going to have a different reaction. So, I mean,
some people probably wouldn't care at all. Yeah. Like, they'd be so secure in themselves and in the relationship. Yeah. They'd be like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, they know nothing's going to come of it. They know it's innocent, whatever, or just natural, and probably be absolutely fine with it.
Mm. And that's,
or would they just pretend they were fine with it?
It's probably pretending as well.
I know.
Like, I think that's why introspection's really important. And probably in a relationship, you know, that's a good example, is like one of my favorite, I suppose, podcasters or influencers, Roxy Nafusi, talks about relationships. Yeah. And she talks about owning your own shit in a relationship.
Right.
So appreciating it when it's your partner causing the issue, or maybe it's you causing the issue, you know?
Yep.
And I totally agree with that. There's times I think where I've looked at a situation and I've gone, no, that's nothing to do with this interplay between me and my partner. This is to do with my pain body, or whatever you want to call it, manifesting things that aren't there, and it's causing tensions that wouldn't exist otherwise.
Right.
So that's why I think that introspection part is really important, especially, you know, if there's any tension in a relationship, is don't just look at, oh, it's my partner's fault or whatever, and that could play into the projection thing. Yeah. Slowly the threads are coming together in my head. But so, you know, that could be the projection at play if you're arguing it. So maybe look at yourself as much as you look at your partner, because it could just be the case that your pain body is basically bringing about things that aren't there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I'm sure your pain body brings around all kinds of things that aren't really there. And yeah, not that we want to get on the pain body too much, but I mean, it does. I mean, it's not necessarily an episode about pain body, but it does intersect a lot with what we're talking about. And it is a psychological phenomenon or whatever, too. It's spiritual. When Totally talks about it, he's talking about it in a spiritual way, but it is a psychological component of our minds. But I can kind of speak to, just to give a quick example. So I can tell you, with my ex-husband, I was much more likely to be jealous if he was looking at another woman or something, because I was not secure in our relationship.
Yeah.
With my current husband, it doesn't. I mean, sometimes my current husband, I gotta stop saying that. I say that like there's gonna be another one. Yeah. I hope there is not.
Hey, you were touching your wedding ring before. I'm worried.
What's happening here? Okay. So maybe my
shadow's coming out, everyone.
So anyhow, oh goodness. So the point is, there is maybe a little tinge of jealousy, but it just naturally comes up, and maybe that's the shadow, but I know how to control it. And and it's gone. Like, I'm much more secure in our relationship. So I'm not projecting that on him, that he is doing anything other than just that his reaction is anything other than just a normal male female reaction. You know. And so I mean, I could say that from experience, that if you're in a secure relationship, your pain body and your shadow aren't going to show up nearly as much.
And
that doesn't have to be a romantic relationship either. It would be in any relationship, a work relationship, whatever. The more secure you are in it, I think the less likely your pain body and shadow are going to be to influence your behavior. Yeah.
Well, a recent example, and this is kind of tying back to the introspection piece, is the other night, and again, it's talking about unconscious stuff because I've been drinking. Not that I do that very often. But I've been drinking, right? And I had an argument with my partner.
Okay.
And basically what had happened, so in the end, she had to go inside to do something, and it gave me some time to sit there, even though I'd had a few bevies. A couple of times, a bit of time to sit there and look at it and say, all right, what happened there? How did we get to this point? And I looked into it and I analyzed all things, and I thought, this has absolutely nothing to do with her and everything to do with me and my pain body and things from the past that are still not dealt with. So straight away, there were two things for me. One was I need to go and apologize and say, that was nothing to do with you. That's me. I'm really sorry. And two, it's then a call to action to say, you've got unresolved stuff still there. You need to deal with that. However you want to do it. If you want to go and see someone about it or figure it out in your own mind, there's unresolved stuff there. So I think that's the importance of the shadow too, is when you look at it, it will highlight for you maybe some unresolved stuff that you've got to go and deal with. You can't just see it and say, all right, whatever, I'll just allow it to continue, because it will continue to cause conflict. But I'm mindful as well, I've completely derailed us talking about the pain body. So maybe speaking of conflict, that could be a segue into aggression and violence.
Okay, sure. So let me see here. Let me look at one thing. Bear with me, people. I have notes today.
Please don't. We've covered a lot of topics.
I know. I don't usually have notes, but I'm just seeing if there's anything here. No, this is basically what we already talked about. So what made me think of aggression as far as the shadow goes is this quote that I came across when I was doing some research for the show. And it's from Clara Thompson, who was a psychoanalyst. And I believe she was around this. I could be completely wrong on this, but I believe she was around at the same time as Jung was. And she said that aggression is not necessarily destructive at all. It springs from an innate tendency to grow and master life, which seems to be carried characteristic of all living matter. Only when this life force, which is aggression, so only when this life force is obstructed in its development do the ingredients of anger, rage, or hate become connected with it. And I just thought that was really interesting to think. So your aggression, which is a part of your shadow, I would say, because I would think most people would see aggression as something that you want to hide from society or not acceptable by society, except in certain arenas. Like it's acceptable in a sporting event, say, it's acceptable in an action movie, say, but in your normal day-to-day life, it's not acceptable to be aggressive, probably. And so it is something that we try to hide. And when you try to hide it or repress it, that's when it turns into the anger, the rage, the hate. So the aggression itself isn't bad. The aggression itself is probably, as we go back to our survival instincts, or whatever I'm trying to say here, is probably part of that, is a method to try to keep us alive, is what it stems from. And if we just acknowledge that and find an acceptable outlet for it, it won't turn into the anger and the rage and, the negative emotions that come along with that.
Yeah. So do you think that's why people love, violent movies so much?
I think so. I think that's one way. Although then now I'm thinking about the pain body again, but I'll let that go. But but I think that is one acceptable way to maybe get your aggression out. Although, are you really getting anything out? I don't know.
Do you know, it's funny, like,
are you, because you're like living vicariously through someone else? I don't know.
Well, an example I've just thought about was, trying to remember his name. He's actually a politician over in the States. His surname's Kander. Can't remember. Yeah, I'll have to find his name. I'll see if I can remember it. Jeff Kander or something like that.
Okay.
He was a politician, but he experienced PTSD after being in the military, and he didn't experience anything live, but just the day-to-day livings of being a soldier.
Yeah.
Over time, kind of ate away at him. And what he did for many years is, when he got back, he avoided action or war movies because he was worried that these movies would manifest all these negative kind of emotions in him and bring back all those things that he experienced overseas.
Okay.
And what actually happened is, when he started to go to, like veterans counseling kind of thing, is they said, watch these movies. Like, you need to do this, because inside there was like a need to deal with these emotions that wasn't being resolved. So what was happening is, he wasn't sleeping, he was having nightmares, it was impacting his day-to-day because it wasn't being dealt with. So he started watching these war movies, and funnily enough, it actually helped him deal with it. So I do think that's a reason why we like violent games, violent movies. I was talking before the show about John Wick. That movie is essentially Keanu Reeves running around shooting people. One of my favorite movies. And maybe that's because the shadow part of me is longing for that kind of controlled aggression, and it doesn't want that to go beyond into violence. Right. So, I think that's probably maybe a common example for us all.
I think so. Well, and I've wondered, and we talked about this a little bit before too, but I've wondered about myself, because I feel like there's definitely a duality in me, and I always have felt that way. I mean, I've always been very aware of it.
Yeah.
Where I don't think some people are as aware of it. And so, for example, one thing is, I really like dark entertainment. So, like, I like dark movies, I like dark music that most people would probably find depressing, or I don't know, or maybe it would make them angry or bring out the regression or whatever. It doesn't bring out my aggression, but I feel like it maybe does serve the purpose of aggression in some way. I don't know, but I feel like it balances me out in some way.
So on that point, if you didn't listen to your metal music, if you didn't, watch American Psycho, do you
Yeah.
do you think that would cause like a conflict in you? Like maybe it would manifest, or maybe like this aggression would turn into violence? I don't know. Like I can't see you being violent, but I just wonder.
I have been violent before, so no. Remember, 2 weeks ago or something, we talked about Bitch Amanda, and Bitch Amanda can get a little violent. But oh gosh, let me think here. So I don't know, because I think more what it does is, I think it's more the acceptance of it. And I think maybe it is that living vicariously thing, though. Okay, so I'll go to like the music I listen to, for example. A lot of it is people who have had really tough lives, and they make music about it. They have lyrics that talk about their depression, their lost family, their friends that they've alienated, whatever, like all this depressing stuff, how they don't fit in the world and all this stuff. And maybe that's me, like I can feel that and empathize with it. Maybe that is like my version of a violent action movie, because a violent action movie wouldn't do anything for me.
Okay.
And so maybe that is the equivalent of it. But I think that it's part of my shadow. And I think that me accepting it and not hiding it helps me bring out my good side more.
Yep.
Because I could hide that. I don't hide it. I mean, I don't really I don't really go around advertising it per se, but most people, when they find out that I listen to heavy metal music, alt metal, whatever you want to call it, are pretty surprised. And
I was surprised.
So, and that is something, you kind of do hide it from people in a way, just because there is a connotation that goes along with people that listen to that kind of music. Like all of a sudden they think that, I don't know, like I'm doing drugs and having promiscuous sex with everybody and just partying all the time and, all this stuff. I'm down in my basement worshiping Satan. I don't know.
Now I've just got these images. I'm like,
I know. So I think that there is some kind of, and I'm just kind of fleshing this out as we talk about it, but I think there is some kind of expectation that that's not acceptable to society. And so maybe, but I've accepted it and I don't hide it from anyone if it comes up.
Yeah.
So I think that is part of me letting my shadow come through, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's a good example. Yeah. I think, you don't want to deny those things in yourself, like, because it probably will manifest in a very different, more maybe problematic way than if you just listen to the metal music and worship Satan.
To clarify, I do not worship Satan in my basement.
He doesn't. I can guarantee you it's quite the opposite. Just before I forget, so I just remembered the name of that veteran. So it's Jason Kander, everyone, who I think he previously was running for mayor of Kansas City. And so his whole discussion was about veterans, because he's running like a veteran kind of program, I think. And he decided to jump out of that race to deal with his PTSD. So, again, another good example, I think, of just, allowing the things inside you that you're conflicting with to come out in a healthy way, like watching a war movie, for example.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
So we're getting pretty close time here. So is there anything else you wanted to hit before we wrap it up?
No, I've just been meaning to say to everyone how much I've been really enjoying these conversations. And I've said it to Amanda as well. Like in the first couple of episodes, I felt, again, like even though the whole show is about settling is not an option, don't let society's expectations influence you. But in the beginning, when we started the show, I was so caught up in saying the right words and, need to make everything look polished and stuff. And it completely removed my authenticity. Whereas I think at least one of us throughout the show, Amanda, has stuck to her authenticity. But I'm hoping, and I'd love, again, to get some feedback, whether it's on LinkedIn or via our Gmail, if you feel that the authenticity is coming out more in the show, and I hope this one has, please let us know, because we are just keen to get your feedback and hear your thoughts on it. And thanks to anyone who has given us feedback so far. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, yeah, and that kind of is one of our core values of the show. Well, it is my core value, is authenticity, but it's also been the core value of the show as we've gone on this journey, or whatever you want to call it, is that we just wanted to keep it real, for lack of a better term, and just not settle for having to put on a facade and having to act like we know things that we don't know, and just to open up that conversation to let everybody else know too that we're not all perfect, but that doesn't mean that we have to settle for for what society has laid out for us either. So exactly. Awesome. All right, so should I wrap things up here?
Wrap it up.
All right, so we'll recap the 3 things we talked about, and I think we hit them all. Don't settle for your preconceived notions of the world and yourself. Don't settle for resisting your shadow. Don't settle for confusing aggression with destruction as you accept your shadow. So we did hit all of those things. So you can find us. Well, I don't know how you're listening or watching right now, but there are other ways to find us. You can find us on YouTube if you like video. If you like audio, you can find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean. That's where we are now. We're on LinkedIn. If you want to get a hold of us through LinkedIn, or cheerstoNotSettling@gmail.com. I think those are all the ways to get a hold of us. But please, too, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, like whatever platform you're on, it sounds weird to say that, but you know what I mean. Hit the like button. That's what I'm trying to say. Hit the like button, comment, share it, whatever, because all of that stuff helps us get traction. And don't forget to head on over to Coffee if you would like to donate as little as $1 to support us and keep this thing going. We would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, we'll say cheers to not settling.
Cheers to not settling.
All right, take care.